Boker Tov, we're holding on Daf Kafchet Amud Aleph. We're by where it says Tnan. Okay, so it says Haita Achat Mehen Asra Al Ha'echad Isur Erva Asur Ba Mutar Ba'achota. So the case is you have two sisters falling to two brothers for Yibum. So if one of them is an Erva on one of the brothers, so that brother who she is an Ervan is allowed to marry that sister, the one who's not her sister, right? The one who's not the Erva. You marry the Erva's sister, who's the Yevamot, who's the Erva's sister, and the other brother has to chalitza. He can't. He's not allowed to do yibum to either one of them. So that's what we learned in the Mishnah. The second brother is not allowed to do yibum to either one. So salka da'atan denaf lachamoto techila. The Gemara says the original assumption is we're talking about even a case where the erva was the first one to fall. So first the erva falls, and then her sister falls to yibum. So the brother, who she's an erva on, he's allowed to do yibum to her sister, and the other brother he has to do chalitza. He can't do yibum to any of them. So the Gemara says, "V'amai, why is that true? Leku chatan leyabem hach de'ena chamoto beresha." Why don't we say that the chatan, the one who the erva fell to yibum, it's his erva, so he can do yibum to the other sister, and v'tiyaveh chamoto legabe idach kivama shehutra v'ne'esra v'chazra v'hutra tachzor leheter harishon, and then the erva will be back to her original heter. Now, what does that mean? So let's say like this: you have two brothers, and these two sisters fall. So let's say first the erva falls. So the erva has no zika to this brother. She has a zika only to this brother. She's muteret only to the second brother. And then her sister falls. When her sister falls to yibum, so at this point, they're both asura on the second brother. They're both asurot on the second brother. But the sister is muteret to the first brother. Because for the first brother, it's not achot zekukato. Because it's not the sister of the lady who he has a zikah to, because he doesn't have a zikah to the other lady because she's an erva to him. So the first brother would be allowed to do yibum to the lady who's not an erva, and that zikah will be gone. And then this lady who is an erva could marry the second brother because she's a yevama that when she first fell, she was muteret. And then afterwards, she became asura, and then she became muteret again. So you could have a scenario where both brothers could do yibum. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Papa kegon denaf lahach de'ena chamoto beresha. Rav Papa says we're talking about a case where you're right. The one who is not the mother-in-law, the one who's not the erva, fell first. In which case, there's not going to be a situation of tachzor lehetera harishon, because at the time that the erva fell, she never had a heter to the second brother. The erva fell as a chod zekukato. Okay. Next in the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Beit Shammai Omrim. So we had a machloket in the Mishnah, whether we said that if the two brothers do marry the two sisters, they do yibum yotziu. They have to divorce. Beit Shammai and Rabbi Eliezer said Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel had a machloket about this. Rabbi Eliezer said Beit Shammai said yekayem, they could stay married, and Beit Hillel said yotziu. So says the Gemara Tanya. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Beit Shammai omrim yekayemu, Beit Hillel omrim yotziu. Beit Shammai says that they're allowed to stay together if they do marry the two sisters that are Yevamot, and Beit Hillel says yotziu. Beit Hillel says no, they have to get divorced. Rabbi Shimon Omer yekayemu. Rabbi Shimon says that yekayemu, they are allowed to stay together. Abba Shaul Omer, Abba Shaul says, Kal haya lehem bele Beit Hillel bedavar zeh. Abba Shaul says Beit Hillel was more lenient than Beit Shammai over here. Beit Shammai omrim yotziu. Beit Shammai is the one that says that they have to get divorced. So Beit Hillel omrim yekayemu, and Beit Hillel says that they don't have to get divorced. So we have three shitas here. First shita is Beit Shammai says that they can stay together, and Beit Hillel says they have to get divorced. Second shita, Boker Tov. Second shita is Rabbi Shimon. He says that they're allowed to stay together, and Abba Shaul, he says no. Beit Shammai is more machmir over here. Beit Shammai is the one that says that they have to get divorced, and Beit Hillel says that they could stay together. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Keman. Who is Rabbi Shimon going like? Ike Beit Shammai, Hainu Rabbi Eliezer. If he's paskening, meaning the understanding is Rabbi Shimon's not arguing on Beit Shammai or Beit Hillel. He's paskening like one of them. So if he's paskening like Beit Shammai, so then Hainu Rabbi Eliezer. He's going like Rabbi Eliezer. Ike Beit Hillel, Hainu Abba Shaul. If he's paskening like Beit Hillel, then he's going like Abba Shaul. Meaning, who does he pasken like? He's not arguing with Shammai or Hillel. He's saying a psak. So if he's saying, he said that they could stay together. So if he's saying paskening, saying that they could stay together, and he's paskening like Beit Shammai, so then he's going like Rabbi Eliezer. If he's saying they could stay together and he's paskening like Beit Hillel, then he's going like Abba Shaul. Like which opinion is he hold like? So Gemara says, Hachi Kamar. He holds that there is no machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel with regard to this. So you have three shitot. First shita holds that is Rabbi Eliezer. Beit Shammai says that they can stay together. Beit Hillel says that they have to get divorced. Second shita is there's no machloket. Everyone, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, agree that they have to that they're allowed to stay together. And the third opinion, Abba Shaul says, no. Beit Shammai is more machmir, like usual, and Beit Shammai is the one that says that they have to get divorced. Beit Hillel says that they could stay together if the two brothers marry the two sisters. Okay, right. We're by where it says Haita achat mehem. So one of them is asura, isur erva on one of the brothers. So you have two sisters falling yibum to two brothers. Those two sisters will have those two sisters. One of them is asura on one of the brothers. So the Gemara says, Hatanina chada zimna. We already had on 8 daf ago, on daf chaf, amud aleph, we had a Mishnah. In the Mishnah, we learned this rule, that if two sisters fall to yibum, to a brother, and one of them is an erva on that brother, then the brother is allowed to marry. There's no isser of achot zekukato. Generally, there's an isser of achot zekukato. You can't marry the sister of a lady who falls to you to yibum. So if two sisters fall to yibum, you can't marry either one of them. But if one of them is an erva, you're allowed to marry the other one because there's no zikah in that situation. So the Gemara says we already learned this. Why do we need this Mishnah to teach us the same thing? What did we learn? We learned, and the case was that if one of them is an erva, you can have two sisters that are both Yevamot. One of them is an erva. The sister can do chalitza or yibum, because it's not achot zekukato, because there's no zika to the erva. So says the Gemara, tzricha, I need both mishnayot. I need one mishnah to teach me that here, and I need the mishnah on daf chaf as well. Why? So the difference is the Mishnah on Daf Chaf is talking about one brother, and two sisters fell to him to Yibum. One of them is in Erva. In our Mishnah, it's talking about two brothers, where two sisters fell to them to Yibum, and one of them is in Erva on one of the brothers. So I needed to teach me both cases. Why? Ti'iash mi'inan hatam mishum deleka lemigzar mishum sheni. If it would have taught me over there that when two sisters fall to a brother to yibum, and one of them is an erva, he's allowed to do yibum to the sister, that's because there's no second brother. We're not worried that he's going to marry the wrong guy. But in a situation where there's a second brother, where the second brother still has an isur achot zekukato, so if we let the first brother marry one of the sisters, the second brother really has to do chalitza. He's not allowed to do yibum, and he may come to do yibum. So in a case where there's two brothers, there's room to make a gezerah that he shouldn't be allowed to, the first brother shouldn't be allowed to marry the sister who's not an erva, because maybe the second brother is going to come end up doing yibum when he's not allowed to. So therefore, that's what the Gemara says, Diash minan hata mishum delek la migzar mishum sheni. By the case on Daf Chaf, the Mishnah, where there's only one brother with two sisters falling to him, one of them is an erva, so there's no room to make any gzera on the second brother. Aval hacha dika lemigzar mishum sheni. But in our case, it's shayach to make a gzera that the first brother shouldn't do yibum to any of the sisters, because maybe the second brother is going to come to do yibum. Meaning, even though it's mutar for the first brother, because one of them is an erva on him, so it's not achot zekukato. He could do yibum to the other sister, but still, we're worried maybe the second brother will also end up doing yibum, and he's not allowed to because for him it is achot zekukato. So emalo. So I might think that he should not be allowed to do yibum when there's two brothers. So therefore, it needed to teach me this case of two brothers. Now, why didn't it just say this case, and we would learn the other case from here, the case of one brother from here? V'yashminan hacha mishum deika sheni dekamukach. If over here, when you have two brothers, the fact that the second brother is always going to do chalitza, meaning the case again, just to clarify, you have two sisters falling to two brothers. One of them is an erva. One of the sisters is an erva to one of the brothers. So in that case, the second brother is going to always have to do chalitza. So if the fact that the second brother is always doing chalitza shows that there is an isur achot zekukato. But when you have one brother, there's no proof that there's an isur of achot zekukato. There's nothing being done to show that in general there is an isur here. There's no second brother that's going to be doing chalitza to show that there's an issue of achot zekukato. Emalo, I might say that you shouldn't allow the brother, that single brother, to do yibum to the sister, to the Yevamot, who's the sister of the erva, because they might come to allow achot zekukato by one brother. Therefore, I might say don't do yibum at all. So therefore, tzricha needs to teach me a chidush that by both cases, if one of the sisters is an erva, whether it's one brother that it falls to, whether it's two brothers that it falls to, the brother who's an erva to one of the sisters can do yibum to her other sister, which is the other Yevamot. Okay, Isur mitzvah. So we said in the Mishnah, if it's Isur mitzvah or Isur kiddusha, which is shniyot la'arayot, certain arayot that are derabanan, or Isur kiddusha, like an almana to a kohen gadol, or one of the other lavim. So in such a case, she's not considered like an erva, and the brother that she's an erva to is not allowed to do yibum to her sister, and she requires chalitza. So says the Gemara, Hanami Tanina. This is also something that we learned in that same Mishnah on Daf Chaf. It says Isur mitzvah ve'Isur kedusha choletzet ve'lo mityavemet. We learned on Daf Chaf that these types of isurim, isur mitzvah, isur kiddusha, meaning things that are not arayot deoraita, but arayot derabanan or lavin, that fall to yibum, they require chalitza. There's still a zikah there. So what's it coming to teach me over here? Our Mishnah says that if you have two sisters falling to two brothers to yibum, and one of them is not an erva deoraita, but an erva derabanan. So okay, they both have to get chalitza. There's still two sisters that have a zikah. So I already know that. So what's the point of teaching it to be here? So says the Gemara, Hatam isur mitzvah lechuda, hacha isur mitzvah va'achota. The difference is, in that case, we were talking about a lady who just a single lady. We're not talking about two sisters. We're talking about somebody falls to yibum. She is in isur mitzvah. She's a shniyot la'arayot. She's an erva derabanan, so she requires chalitza. Over here, we're talking about where you have two sisters. One of them is a shniyot la'arayot. So salka da'atach amina, I might have a hava amina that lekum isur mitzvah bimkom isur erva v'tityabem. That we should make it, the chachamim should make it, that this isur derabanan, this erva derabanan, should be treated like a real erva. This isur mitzvah, the shniyot la'arayot, should be treated like a real erva, v'tityabem, and she should do yibum, meaning the sister will do yibum. Kamash malan, that we don't say that. Now says the Gemara, v'tityabem, what type of hava amina is that yibum would be allowed in such a case? She's not a real erva. So there is still a zikah here, and there's going to be an isur of achot zekukato for the brother to do yibum to her sister. Because, again, two brothers fall to two sisters. One of the sisters is shniyot la'arayot to one of the brothers. Okay? So, The Gemara says there's a hava amina that we're going to treat her like an erva deoraita, and the brother who's an erva to her could do yibum to her sister. So the Gemara says, what type of hava amina is that? V'titiyabem, you're going to tell me that she would be able to do yibum. Kevan de mideoraita ramya kame kapaga ba'achot zekukato. Since mideoraita, she's falling to him, meaning mideoraita, there's a zikah there. So to be with her sister is going to be achot zekukato. So says the Gemara, salka da'atacha amina mishum mitzvah avud rabanan. Kamash malan, we don't say that. What's the hava amina? So you have to remember, the whole isur of achot zekukato is the rabbanan. Al mideoraita, a person is not allowed to be with his wife's sister. Rabbanan said, you know what? You also can't be with your Yevamot sister. So if you have two sisters that are Yevamot, you're stuck. You can't be with either one. But I might have had a hava amina that in a situation of mekom mitzvah, to do the mitzvah of yibum, Chachamim would view an erva d'Rabbanan like an erva d'Oraita. They wouldn't be gozer the isser of achot zekukato in such a situation in order to allow yibum to happen. That's what I would have thought. I would have had such a hava amina. Kamash malan, that we don't say that. That's why we need to teach the scenario where you have two brothers, two sisters falling to two brothers to yibum. One of them is isur mitzvah. One of them is a shniyot la'arayot, is an erva d'Rabbanan. Why do I need to tell me that they both require chalitza? None of them could do yibum, because I would have had a hava amina that since the isur of achot zekukato, of marrying your Yevamah sister, is only d'Rabbanan, and one of them is an erva d'Rabbanan, so Chachamim said, in such a case, we don't want to take away the mitzvah of yibum, so we'll allow him to do yibum to that erva d'Rabbanan sister. That's what we would have thought. Kamash malan, that we don't say such a thing. That's the chidush in our Mishnah. Okay, further. Haita achat mehen. So the next line in the Mishnah was, I think one of them is an isur. Let's see. Haita achat mehen asura al zeh isur. Oh yeah. Well, one of them. Okay. So the case is the final case. You have two brothers fall to two sisters. One of them is an erva on brother number one, and the other sister is an erva on brother number two. Okay. So we said that brother number one is allowed to do yibum to the second sister, and brother number two is allowed to do yibum to the first sister. Meaning each one is allowed to do yibum to the sister that's not an erva on them. So the Gemara says, Hatu lamali. Why do we need this case? This is something that we know also. Hainu hach. It's the same thing that we just said earlier in this Mishnah. That isur erva, if one of them is an erva, then there's no zika. And if there's no zika, she's allowed to, the guy is allowed to marry her sister, the Yevamah that's her sister. So mali chad, mali trey. What's the difference? Meaning we said it earlier in the Mishnah in the context of she's an erva on one of the brothers. So what does it make a difference if one sister is an erva on one brother, or the other sister is also an erva on the other brother? Why should that make any difference? This is something that doesn't need to be said. So says the Gemara tzricha. No, it does need to be said. There is a chidush. Why? In the earlier case of the Mishnah, where you had two brothers and two sisters, one of them is an erva on one. So the first brother is allowed to marry the sister of the erva, because it's not achot zekukato. The second brother has to do chalitza. He's not allowed to do yibum in that situation. So the Gemara says that I would have thought that that's only true in such a case where she's an erva, one of the ladies is an erva on one of the brothers. Why? Because because you have the second brother that since he's doing chalitza, he's showing that there's an isur of achot zekukato. There's an isur of doing yibum to the sister of a lady who had a zikah with me. Boker tov. Aval hacha deleka sheni dekamukach. But in this case where both brothers are doing yibum to both sisters, because sister number one is erva on brother number one, so she could do yibum to the second brother, and sister number two is erva on brother number two, so she's doing yibum to the first brother. So you don't have sheni de kamukach. You don't have that the second brother is doing you don't have that the second brother is doing chalitza and proving that there's an isur of achot zekukato. So emalo, I might think no, we don't say in such a case that they should be allowed to do yibum. So therefore, comes to teach me that no, they're allowed to do yibum. Even the second brother is allowed to do yibum. V'yashminan hacha, and if it would have only told me this case where both sisters are arayot on both brothers. Sister number 1 is an ervan, brother number 1. Sister number 2 is an ervan, brother number 2, and it's telling me that they're allowed to marry the sister of the one that's an ervan them. So. The fact that they're each marrying the opposite one, it's clear that there's an isur of achot zekukato. Aval idach, but in a case where only one of them is an ervan one, lo, I might have not known that. I might not know that there's an isur of achot zekukato tzricha. Therefore, we need to teach me this chiddush. So let's go a little bit further, just a few more lines, just to get to the end of this idea. Okay, Zuhi Sha'amru. So we say at the very, very end, we say Zuhi Sha'amru Achota She'yivimta Choletz Lo Mityavemet. That's what we mean when we say Achota She'yivimta Choletz Lo Mityavemet. That the when you have a lady who's her sister, you have two sisters falling to Yibum, basically, that they could do Chalitza or Yibum. That's this scenario where one's an erva on one brother, the other is an erva on the other brother. So says the Gemara, Zuhi lemute mai. We're saying Zuhi, this is the case where you could have two sisters fall to Yibum and they're both allowed to do Yibum. So lemute mai, what's this coming to exclude? So says the Gemara, lemute isur mitzvah. It's coming to exclude isur mitzvah. Arayot derabanan. That if you have arayot derabanan, meaning you have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Two sisters fell to them. The first sister is an erva derabanan on Reuven, and the second sister is an erva derabanan on Shimon. So I might have thought, for some reason, that they would each also allowed to be marry the sister of the one that's an erva to them. So says the Gemara, so the Gemara says, Hatu lamali. Why do you need to teach me that? What's the havamina that it would have been? I already know that when you have an isur mitzvah falling to yibum, two sisters, there's no scenario of yibum. They have to do chalitza. So what's it coming to teach me when it says only when they're arayot deraita can they marry their sister, the Yevamot, their erva's sister, who's the other Yevamot? What's it coming to teach me that this is not true by arayot derabanan? So Hainuhach, it's the same thing that we learned earlier. Mali lechad, mali litrei. What does it make a difference if it's by one brother or by two brothers? We mentioned earlier, by one brother, if she's an erva derabanan on one brother, it doesn't make a difference. He has to do chalitza. He's not allowed to marry her sister. There's still a zikah. So why would it be any different when it's both brothers? Both ladies are erva, each one on one of the brothers. Why would that make a difference? So the Gemara says there's a svara. Ma'odetema. Kilo amrinan uki sur mitzvah b'mkom yisur erva. When do we say that we don't treat the erva derabanan like an erva deoraita? Hechadika lemigzar mishum sheni. Only when there's a second brother who may end up doing yibum when he's not allowed to, and there's a scenario. There's room to make a gezerah because of that second brother. Aval hecha deleka lemigzar mishum sheni. But in a scenario where there's no second brother to be gozer, each brother is allowed to do yibum. So ema lahai ukimna yisur mitzvah b'mkom yisur erva, ulahai ukimna yisur mitzvah b'mkom yisur erva. I might think that, listen, we have two brothers here. We have two arayot derabanan. There's mitzvah of yibum. Chachamim made it asur for achot zekukato. Chachamim made it asur to do yibum to the sister of your Yevamah. So now you have two sisters that are both Yevamot, but Chachamim could rescind that Isur because Chachamim are the ones who made it. Chachamim could rescind it in order to do the mitzvah of Yibum when you have Arayot Derabanan, and each one is an Erva Derabanan, and each one is allowed to marry the other brother. There's no room to make a gezerah here that one of the brothers is going to do Yibum when he's not supposed to. So therefore, I would have thought that in such a case, they would also be allowed to do Yibum. Kamash Malan, that we don't say that. Okay, Chazakim Uvruchim.